Hello, Garland Nixon here. We're hanging out with Dad. That's Peter Erickson from Conversation Amongst the Ruins. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and I'm here with the one and only, the great Peter Erickson. I'm sure you know who he is. He's from Conversations Amongst the Ruins. Everybody, let's hear it for Peter Erickson. And of course, I understand that the approval rating from for Emmanuel Macron has hit the news. Let's see what Emmanuel Macron. What do you think of your approval rating?
Yeah, I saw 11%. That's the last one I saw.
Yes, a towering 11%. Okay, I guess he'll be getting out of getting out of the plane, and you know, Brigitte will be giving him the old two-hand push to the face for that one. But at any rate, you know, I think that is relevant here for this reason. Right now, it appears that things are, shall we say, coming unglued on the infamous contact line in Ukraine, right? Which is sad because people are losing their lives. It's actually terrible. I'm not trying to joke about something so serious. But my point is this. Things are coming unglued. For a long time, the discussion was, oh, my gosh, what is NATO going to do? You know, when we started getting to these moments of, you know, of controversy, of things are coming apart. Is NATO going to say, that's it, we're coming in, we're stepping in? Okay. Clearly, Trump has no influence. The Americans never. They ain't bailing nobody out. They're always, that's not happening. But certainly, the coalition of the willing would like to do that. I heard that France was able to put together 2,000 troops, which probably ain't going to get it done. Your thoughts on it's happening now at a time when the leaders, Merritt, he ain't much better. Starmer ain't much better. So how do you drag your country into war when the people want to drag you into the streets and put you in a guillotine? Those two things don't seem to align too well. Peter Erickson, your thoughts?
Yeah, they certainly don't. I mean, I don't know where these guys are, you know, on what plane they're existing or what they're smoking or whatever, because they certainly seem to have lost grasp of reality, you know, certainly of their own domestic politics. You know, maybe I'm not being fair. They know about what's happening in their own countries. They understand the politics there, but they just don't care. It's you know, they're globalists. And part of being a globalist is that you don't take the interests of your countrymen very seriously. So what they much prefer to do is, you know, fly off to London or Berlin or whatever and attend these coalition of the willing or the deluded, as somebody else calls them, these meetings. And, you know, they get to hobnob with other important people, and they get to, you know, there are all kinds of photo ops, and they get to hug Zelensky, and that's what they want to do. And, you know, I think you're right. I mean, they really do. They seem to have this lust for war. You know, they want to play Churchill, and they do want to send their troops. But as you point out, their ability to do that is extremely limited. And I think we really have to be very grateful for that. And then the willingness of their people to support such a move is also, you know, very minimal. So again, I think we should be grateful that they're such fools and that they really they have failed to convince their own people of this cause. And maybe we can just kind of let them, you know, continue to, you know, inhabit this alternate reality that they currently inhabit. And because when the time comes, and eventually will, you know, like you say, the line is unraveling. There is a clear acceleration. I've been looking at statistics, and we have surpassed, you know, the peak. It was last November of last year that we saw the most rapid advance, and we've gone beyond that. And I think more importantly, you know, that's just quantity. We're just talking about territory. We're talking about major strategic centers, cities like the Pokrovsk agglomeration and Kupiansk and whatever. So it's not just that they're seizing a lot of territory, but at pretty much the same time, approximately 4, maybe 5 different strategic cities and towns are falling to the Russians, and we haven't ever seen anything like that before. This is a real acceleration, and it's going to raise the alarm bells, and it's going to be a lot of more meetings of the coalition of the willing, and there will be a lot more posturing and photo ops and hugs and everything. But that obviously doesn't do anything. The reality is being made for us there on the front line, and then it'll be interesting at some point. Because it seems very unlikely that they can do anything. It's not beyond impossible. Maybe they'll send these very small forces. We were talking about 2,000 from France and something similar from Britain, and basically all they could really be is tripwire forces. And I think their hope is it's really a Hail Mary pass. It's just that Trump will come to the rescue, and I don't think so. I agree. I don't think he has any interest in doing that. But Trump is Trump, and whenever you think you've got him figured out, and he won't do something, he does it, and vice versa. So there is always a risk that their Hail Mary pass just might work. I don't think so. That's all I can say. And so what will happen is that I don't know. There will be a crisis. They can't do anything. They'll realize they can't do anything. The Americans, let's say, tell them, "Yeah, no, you go in there. You're on your own." And their own people say, "You go in there, and we're going to storm the Elysee or whatever." And so they call it off, and then they're going to have another meeting, and they're going to have to come up with some completely new narrative, and I don't know what it'll be. It'll be somewhere in that alternate reality that they inhabit.
Well, let me just hold on. This stupid thing. There we go. Let me try to close this. All right, let me show you something. If the Europeans were wondering whether or not the U.S. is setting up to help their tripwire force to be there and come in and slam them, they're gearing up. This is what we used to call in the law enforcement investigations community a clue. The U.S. draws down troops on NATO's eastern flank as Europe frets about a security vacuum. So if the Europeans were thinking, well, maybe, just maybe, the Americans they're ready to help us fight the Russians. The Americans are like, yeah, guys, I guess we'll be moving on. It looks like there's some problems going on around here. Guess what? They're out of there. It's not going to happen.
Very unlikely. Very unlikely.
Yeah. History tells us, it doesn't tell us everything, but the safe bet is consistency. The U.S. goes into Vietnam or wherever, I don't care where it is. They raise all kinds of chaos. They cause all kind of stuff. And when times get hard, they get the hell out. Afghanistan, you know what I always call it? The Samsonite option. They pack their bags and they leave, right? And right now, you can tell, you know what I mean? It's like, Trump's like, yeah, we're getting out of here. And then they'll grab him and we need some long-range missiles. Crap. Okay, well, we've got that settled. Long-range missiles not coming right now. All right, well, guys, I guess we'll be running. Oh, well, wait, we need something else. And it's like the Americans are doing everything they can to try to get the hell out as quickly as possible. And the Europeans are like in this deluded, maybe there's some way we can draw the Americans in so they'll fight the Russians. And the problem with the tripwire is this: there's got to be a bomb on the other end of it. It's like, hey, pull the tripwire, click. Right. Okay, great. I guess the bomb. Well, no, it's just tied to a tree on the other end. There is no bomb. There's no bomb for the tripwire. So they send 2,000 people in there. The Russians dropping a Reshnik on them, killing every one of them. And they go, okay, Americans, come on, help us. And the Americans are like, yeah, well, we're kind of busy right now, but we'll give you a call later. Toodles. I think that's where they are.
Yeah, well, I think you may be right. And I was just thinking, like, man, I wouldn't want to be a tripwire troop, a soldier. It's like, going into a situation, understanding that you're a part of a so-called tripwire force. That means your job is to get killed, basically. Again, maybe we would even see some mutinies on the Western side. I can't.
You're like a South American. You're like a South American tree frog. There's these tree frogs, right? And if a fox or something comes along and eats one, right? They make them sick and violently ill and all that kind of stuff. So sick that they'll never eat another one. But that frog's kind of screwed, isn't he? Because
Yeah.
he had to sacrifice himself for the rest of the frog population in general. That's
Right.
pretty much the tripwire force.
Yeah, yeah, no, it is exactly. I imagine a lot of guys here thinking about. They see what these guys are talking about, and they pick up the paper tripwire force and say, "Wait a second, I got to get out of here." Or that idea of signing up, joining the Foreign Legion or whatever. Maybe there's other career paths I can look at.
Dying as the outlaw Josie Wales, I can give you two things. One of the things he said was, "Dying ain't no way to make a living, son." And the other
Right.
one was when they were. Do you ever see the outlaw Josie Wales?
I don't know if I
They were.
have.
He was on this. These guys were coming to get him, and they were on this. But it was like a ferry that you stand on, and there's a rope across the river, and the guy just pulls the rope hand over hand, and you pay him something to ferry you back and cross the force.
Okay.
So he's standing, the general, whoever's back there, and he's got a couple of guys out front with guns looking around. And one guy says to him, "Hey, maybe he's on the other side and aiming at us. Maybe he can shoot him." And the guy says, "The most he can do is pick off a couple of those guys up front." And the guys up front go, like, what the hell is he pick up?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the tripwire force.
Right, exactly.
Yes. But so that's where we are. Interesting. I also think doesn't this kind of everything really with the Europeans plays into the Russian strategy? Number one, they want to move slow. So now apparently the Ukrainians are like, well, we're not letting you get away with that. We're going to send in reinforcements. Well, they'll all be killed too, of course. Mm-hmm. The Europeans are like, we're not even going to accept that those soldiers are in there, and we're not going to negotiate for them being out, which means they'll all be killed, right? So the slower you go, the Russians fight slow. The more you slow things up, you're fighting their style. And I guess the other part of it is we're talking about that ultimate point where you say, it looks like the Russians are going to win. And how does NATO react, right? It seems to me what the Russians are doing is, let's not make that one smash. Let's do it a little bit at a time. You know what I mean? We'll surround these troops. We'll do this. There's one. And so instead of one big thing where you're all like, oh my gosh, we got to make a decision. They just keep doing it in little chunks before you realize they've won the war. It's too late.
Right. Well, it's kind of, often we hear this term salami slicing or the boiling frog, and it's usually applied in a critical way of the Russians. So, say, well, that's what that's what the West is doing, right? They've been slowly escalating. They've been slicing the salami, and because they don't take a big chunk all at once, Russia doesn't react, and that way, okay, we got them. We can just keep on escalating forever, just slowly. You can make basically, you made the argument that, well, that's what the Russians are doing, actually, really, to the West, is that they're going slow, and it just slow but sure, it's the slow and steady wins the race. They're the tortoise, but they're going to beat the hare. They know it. They have no doubts that they're controlling the tempo. It's to their liking. They're methodically destroying all the NATO equipment. And the sad part, the tragic part, it is also the Ukrainian armed forces. We're talking about all these men that are being killed. That's but that's happening, and it's happening slowly. And then eventually, when it's all gone, it's just like, oops, wait a second, how did that happen? It's because they did it gradually. I think it was Eve Smith that said of Naked Capitalism, that said that, around a crazy person, you don't want to make any sudden moves. And I think maybe that's part of it too. It's just that we go at this slowly, and then they'll have their occasional meetings of the coalition of willing. I don't know how many times they've done that. There'll be another sanctions package, so it will be eventually like the sanctions package number 53, and there'll be just as many meetings of the coalition of willing. And then at that point, all of a sudden they realize, wait a second, it's all over. We lost. What have we been doing?
Well, the other thing is, have you noticed something that died? Drones. The Russians they've got drones in our airspace, and drones are landing on chicken coops in Poland. And oh my gosh, there's drones all over the place. The Russians' drones. We need a drone wall. We need $1 trillion drone wall. Drones. The Russians, and now they're just like, yeah, I guess that didn't really bite, huh? Didn't get any head. We ran that up the flagpole and nobody saluted. Okay, drones is over. Let's move on to something. It's so obvious that they're desperate. And they tried drones for a couple weeks. I'll give them that. They gave it a good hard 3 to 4 weeks of drones. Drones is gone.
Right. It's the old college try. They did it. And you got to respect them for that, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, no, it was really silly. But yeah, in the end, yeah, they created a commotion and they worked themselves up into a lather, and they probably got some of their population slightly nervous about it, but then these reports started to filter out. It's like, okay, when they actually caught somebody, it was always a local, a hobbyist or whatever, or some teenager, or but it was never. They even seized that tanker that was supposed to be part of the so-called shadow fleet, and yeah, there was nothing there. There was no Russian connection, and I think people just had to notice that more or less over time, and the whole thing, yeah, it failed to produce the dividends they were hoping for.
Yeah, it was like we were like led to believe that they were like these Russian attack drones or something. And then it ended up like a DJI. I got one sitting right there where you sit there, and they'll fly for like 25 minutes. And I'm thinking, how the hell are they going to attack you with a drone that will only stay in the air for 20? Well, they can take pictures of you, maybe. I don't know if that's a bad thing.
Right.
Maybe, who knows? But I'm like, I don't see anything that looks like it is of any consequence. And it was just like, it was narrative. It was a PR thing. It was let's go with the drone PR. And now it seems like they're running out of stuff.
Yeah. They'll think something else up, we'll see. But
They're creative, huh? I'm not giving them enough credit.
Yeah, right. Well, they're working on it. Maybe that's what these meetings are all about. Like, what are we going to try next? I don't know. There's something else will happen. There was also the airspace violations. We got a few of those, and I think it's all designed to whip up their populations. They're hoping against hope that there will be real war fever, among the people, and they haven't seen that. They've managed to scare some people into buying too many things at the local big box or whatever, just to stock their basements with. But other than that, they didn't really do much.
Yeah, their preparation for, I think we talked about it. I was reading and they were like, yes, we're preparing for war. And they're like, what are they doing in Finland? And they're like, they're practicing. The members of parliament are practicing going into the basement in a bomb shelter. And I'm like, so you're getting ready for war with Russia. And what are we doing? Yes. And I thought, well, okay, we're practicing assaulting positions, bombing runs, strafing runs, torpedoes. Those are all, you're preparing for war. And they're like, oh, no, we're hiding in the basement. And I'm thinking, well, that's probably the most appropriate thing you can do in Finland. You got 6 million people. If you go to war, the basement's the best place for you to be.
Yeah.
It's not going to hold up long against the Red Army.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, no. These people are ridiculous. I don't really. I can't get over it. I was telling somebody recently that before this war broke out, I had some sort of residual respect for Europe. Maybe in some way I still do, but maybe I kind of assumed that their governments were a little wiser, a little bit more experienced, or whatever. Maybe it's probably some silly old prejudice or something, but I had that, but that is just completely gone. I mean, it's just what a bunch of clowns, it's funny. And then other times it's kind of sad. I say, well, that there used to be statesmen, that lived, that occupied these offices, and where are they? Hopefully it'll all end up, who was it? T.S. Eliot. He says that the end will not in a bang, but in a whimper. You say that it'll end with just a whimper. Which is that we'll see that at the end, all of their delusions will just pop, and nothing will happen, and we'll just all have a big hearty laugh, and that'll be the end of the European establishment and of NATO and the coalition of the willing, and that's my hope anyway.
Yeah, same here. And it's starting to get more obvious that NATO kind of in a way, and I like to use the analogy of a person who's been punched, and at the old term, they're out on their feet. Some guy in a bar gets punched and you see him just going, and he's out. And you see the video of a boxer whap, and the guy kind of freezes in the air.
Yeah.
And he's unconscious and he hits the ground. Well, that's where NATO is. They've been punched, and NATO
Uh-huh.
to me is dead.
Yeah.
Because the idea that it's a defensive alliance, well, like it's blowing up Hungary and Slovakia. I mean, they're like blowing up their own infrastructure. So it's not really an alliance per se. That's not my idea of a partnership of an alliance attacking each other. Defensive, well, they really have Article 5 right now against 3 or 4 of their own countries. And the idea that they're here to protect themselves from Russia, and that they can protect themselves from Russia, were Russia to choose to attack them, all of that stuff's done. So then what is really NATO if all of the narrative of what NATO is and what NATO is capable of is no longer credible? Is NATO as an organization a credible organization? Or is it just a narrative?
Don't you know, Garland, NATO is the mightiest military alliance that the world has ever seen. Yeah, no, I used to hear that often. It was just it was an article of faith. And I'll have to admit, I more or less bought into it. I thought that it was true. Yeah, because again, you look at it, there are all these countries back, including the US, all of them together. They have to be powerful, right? And if you look at the economics of it, if you actually look at their GDPs, combined GDPs in nominal terms, and I think there's a problem with doing that, but it turns out that there's something like they have 25 times the GDP of Russia. That was a claim that was made recently. I looked into that was more or less correct, but I think it shows two things. One is that number is meaningless. That the nominal GDP, it just really doesn't mean a whole lot. It gets pushed around a lot, and you say, Italy has a bigger economy than Russia in, again, nominal GDP terms. I'm sorry, but Russia is a much bigger and more powerful country that can produce a lot more than Italy can. And the other thing is that they obviously, even if they do have quite, a substantial economy, combined economic power, for some reason I don't know what this economy produces. Well, I know some of the things, but they don't seem to be able to produce the guns, what is necessary for this war. We're almost 4 years into this, and there's been talk about ramping up, but there's almost nothing has happened. Now there's just new talk, that's all. And meanwhile, Russia has ramped it up. They can do it. And I think it shows that there is there is a basic flaw in the structure of the MIC, the military industrial complexes in the West. There is something has happened to these. And I think it's just over time, they have become not, complexes that are that are really geared for producing the munitions necessary for war. They're designed, they're there to line the pockets of a lot of people. That's what's happened. It's become a very cozy arrangement all around in Europe and the US. A lot of people make a lot of money off of these weapon systems. And, they're all very happy with it. But it comes to a war. It's not actually, it's clear that there's something deficient here, very deficient.
I think too, here's what we're looking at. The issue of when we say the economy, you can, say just numbers as opposed to a system. You know what I mean? For instance, you have an economy in the West that's turned into nothing but finance capital, which doesn't productively, it isn't even what capitalism claimed it was before it proved that it wasn't, right? It claimed that it was productive, that it produced things, that money was invested, and you invested in a business and you hired people and you built buildings and you built things and you made things. Now it is non-productive capital. What are we going to do? We're going to take money and use complex financial tools that we don't even understand to make more money. And what did somebody say? Your money should be making money for you, and then more money should be making money for that money. Meanwhile, Russia and China are producing steel. You know what I mean? They're producing steel. They're producing oil. And in the end, if you and I are at war, and I got artillery, and you got asset-backed financial tools of, that you don't even understand, but they're turning in 12.5% average over a 4-year period, you lose that war.
Right.
You know what I mean? What do you got? We got the artillery's coming in. What are you going to do? Well, I've got these a folder. Look at this, all of this capital we have. You're going to lose that war. And you know what I mean? In the real world.
Yeah. Well, that's what's been. Yeah. Well, you're right. I mean, that's what this has proven, is that when it comes to real world, a real war, Russia has what it takes. It has this capacity. It is able to ramp up production. It has factories. It's in a very short period of time. Not only has it, churned out huge numbers of artillery shells and drones, but it has also developed entirely new weapon systems. We've had the recent statements about the Burevestnik and the Poseidon. These are remarkable weapons that represent real technological breakthroughs. So all this has been happening. It's like the Russians understood. This actually goes back before the launch of the SMO. Like those weapon systems, it goes back to the abrogation of those treaties by the West, unilateral, ripping up of these treaties, starting with the ABM treaty back in the early 2000s. And when the Russians there, say, hey, this is serious. If you do this, we're going to have to develop some new weapon systems because you have put us at risk. That was something that maintained the balance, and it was for the security of both sides. And you have torn it up. Well, we're going to have to do something about it. Well, they did. They actually went ahead and they did it, and they produced these weapons that they promised that they were going to produce. I remember when Putin announced them, I think it was actually to the Duma in 2018, there was a lot of ridicule, because it was accompanied by some graphics, and the graphics were kind of clunky, and we're much better at graphics, just like we're much better at finance. It's just what a bunch of morons. But each and every one of those systems that he talked about that we just poo-pooed, they have been developed. So they're living in the real world about this. They've understood, they've asked themselves what needs to be done, and they've done it. They have achieved their targets, and that's what we can see. Yeah, we can talk about all these numbers and GDP, and and I think you're right. A big part of that GDP is actually just finance. So it's just sort of this make-believe economy that's making certain people very, very wealthy, but isn't producing the actual goods, or in this case, the munitions that people need.
And I think also there's a long term of war making or fighting or defensive concepts. One of the things that's obvious. So let's go back to the 70s and 80s, where the West was like, we're going to build these really expensive high-tech planes. Right. And so we'll have lots of high tech, expensive planes, and they cost a lot. Everybody will make lots of money. And we can show you, well, look at this first, second, third, fourth, fifth, 12th generation plane. Look what it does. It looks great. It flies. Oh, this is awesome. And it costs 40 million each, 80 million, 150 million, whatever. So great, making lots of money. We got these planes. And the Soviet Union looked at it and said, we can't afford to make planes that many and that much. So what are we going to do?
Right.
We'll develop our missile systems, because that way we can strike long distance and we don't have to fly in because it's too expensive. And it's just one way. So they develop missiles and air defense. Right. Well, they got lots of planes, way more than us. They developed good planes, but they said, we better go with air defense. That way we can shoot the planes down. So their air defense was decades ahead of ours. You take an old S-300 from the 80s, it's still better than anything we got, the Patriot, you name it. Okay, no. So here's my point. The focus on how to fight even goes back to the 80s and the long-term development. Mm-hmm. And here we sit where a society, we'll call it a capitalist, whatever you want to call it, that focused on, let's make these expensive toys and there'll be big profits. That was a big part of it. And some other people saying, we can't afford that. We'll make air defense and missiles that are cheaper. And in the long run, now what do you have? They're producing lots of stuff, but it's cheap to produce it. Mm-hmm. And they're set to produce it, and they're ready to produce it. And their model for fighting a war in the long term is just a better model.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, you really, put your finger on, I think, the difference between the MICs and on the two sides here. And one is for profit. And for profit works for a lot of things. I'm not going to go, launch a diatribe against capitalism in general. But there is a problem when you have this kind of cozy relationship between corporations and the government. And what happens, I think, is you get these perverse incentives, and that is like the more expensive it is, the better, because the more
Good
expensive
point.
it is, the more profit we make. The more that ends up in our profit pockets. All kinds of people, they get there at the feeding trough, and so the things like that actually can win a war, like artillery shells. What kind of profit do you make off of that? It's only like $5 a shell or something. What's the point? And so they just didn't they didn't invest in that. And then, when this war started, I think at the beginning we could only produce like 20,000 a month, which is about what the Russians were firing in a day. They've actually had to import like a whole factory over from Turkey. They've managed to ramp it up a bit, but it was just something that wasn't part of our MIC, because I think that, again, it just wasn't, it wasn't making enough money for all the people that participate in this. And then so it does show a certain weakness, of capitalism. I think it does. That for-profit motive sometimes doesn't mesh very well with the good of society, whatever it might be. And this is one of those cases, where, again, it's not about profit. It's about defending your homeland. It's about the security of your country. And the Russians have a system that they inherited from the Soviet Union that really worked. And it was, when the time came, they had the facilities, they had the programs, whatever, and they just kicked it all into high gear, and we can see the difference.
Absolutely. They weren't tied to an ideology that says, well, we can't possibly have the government make this or that because that would be communism and we don't want communism. So everything at the free market works. You're tied to that ideology, whether it works or not.
Right.
So the Russians were simply like, okay, we got a war going on here. What do we need to do? Well, it will be cheaper, more efficient, more effective if the government handles this, and we can tie this in, and we can say to the guys, what do you want on the field? And they can say this, and we can have military people, and we can have a seamless integration of our industrial complex with our actual military. That seamless integration, to me, is what really makes it work. When you talk to the people, they're like, yeah, we have problems on the field. And we said, I've heard a discussion about this, and they were like, yeah, but these drones and the anti-drone stuff, and it went up the chain, and then they went to the industrial complex, and they said, all right, we got drones with the long fiber optic cables. Mm-hmm. So because there's a seamless integration, right, when you have a problem on the battlefield, it integrates directly into the hardware part. They design something based on the needs. Boom, right, the whole system is effective and efficient. Right. And meanwhile, it's just here. It's like, how can we make more? I saw these drones. I forgot how many hundreds. They call them switchblade drones.
Oh, right.
And I forgot how many hundreds of thousands they were each. And so help me, that little DJI piece of crap that I got there seems like it would be far more effective than they were like little pieces of junk. And they were like, yes, they pay 500. I'm like, 500,000 for that little piece of crap? But they probably cost them a couple grand to make it. The Russians don't have that problem.
Right. Again, there's an incentive to have higher prices, again, for everybody that's involved in this. And then, the other thing you pointed to is equally correct. It's just that, okay, and the Russians are working, and seem to be really having a lot of success to create weapons that are meeting practical needs out there in the field. And then, part of the, what war does. You start to find a war. When you fight a war, you learn exactly, what you need to win the war. Sometimes you don't know until the war begins. Well, that's what's happening. They're having this rapid education, but they have, because of the links that they have with their own MIC, it's so, their needs are being answered through the MIC. Now, in the West and the U.S., I think for the longest time, it's not just that we wanted high-priced things, but showy things. It was like what looked really good at an exhibition. What would, really impress that Emir out there? He wants to have this shiny new toy. It has all the bells and whistles on it, and it can do, in the end, it may be very impressive there, in the exhibition hall or in a demonstration that's done with a great deal of preparation. but actually out in the field, where it's being shot at, where bullets are striking in it and you're dragging it across the mud and all that. That's the reality of war. And shells are landing 10 feet from it, and it's got to be really tough. It's got to be durable, and everything's going to break down. If it breaks down, can you get it running again quickly? Now, again, if you have one of these very, very complex, over-engineered systems from the West, the answer is, it seems like more often than not, no. It's like, it's broke down. We can't figure out what to do. We got to haul it out of here, take it 100 kilometers to the rear, and they got to work on it, and it's out of commission for more than half the time. And it's that's not just something that I'm making up. That was recognized actually by a study done in Germany. They're just looking at how the German equipment had fared in this war, and I think you can say exactly the same thing for so much of the American equipment. Some of it is very impressive there in that exhibition hall, or just on a or maybe in a very short war. Like, it starts off well, but it's not durable, and it's overly complex. So when things break down, you got a real headache, and things will break down in a real war. So that's another advantage the Russians have.
Let's see. Here's an article. Let me just show this at you. I got the whatchamacallit here. What to know about the Russian Switchblade? What to know about the 100 U.S. Switchblade drones heading to Ukraine? There you go. There you got a Switchblade drone, right? Okay. $60,000 to $80,000 each. See, and you notice in the back a little teeny. You got a little teeny propeller over there. It looks like when I was a kid, I was in the Boy Scouts, and we had these. They were called COX. You remember those? COX. They had these airplanes with a little gas engine in it, and you put it in, and you hold onto a string, and they fly around in circles or something. That looks like a kid's toy. 60 to 80 grand for that. Yeah. And I'm sure, from my understanding, was they brought them in, and like within days, the Russians had figured out how to jam them. And they bought like millions and millions of dollars of them came in boxes. And after like 2 days, the Russians jammed them, and they just had to throw them away because they were of no value. And that's what you've gotten. But 80 grand a piece for that. I wish I could get some of that action.
Yeah. So, again, it's back home. Everybody's happy about it. Hey, that worked out really well, And then I heard the same thing happened actually with the drones supplied by Turkey that I think did very well in that Azerbaijan, Armenia. Yeah. But they were immediately neutralized by the Russians. The drones that were effective were actually developed by the Ukrainians themselves, who understood what was happening. They started to figure it out, and they've got some creative people. They have these workshops spread throughout the country. And if it wasn't, I would say, for their own drone industry, this war would probably be over already. As it's just the fact that they've managed to keep on producing drones that actually, have, that cause the Russians to proceed cautiously. That they have to take into account. It has changed things on the front. They're not going to win the war with them. They're losing. The Russians have taken the advantage in drone production too. I think it's both quantitative and qualitative. I've heard some, other opinions, but it seems the consensus is that the Russians are ahead in this too. But yeah, if it wasn't for Ukraine's native industry, which was, again, wasn't geared like so much of the Western MIC to profit, but something that was clearly directed at the reality at the front there. They would have been out of this war a long time ago.
Let's look at something else here. Our second subject. No decision on whether to strike inside Venezuela, Trump says. U.S. President Donald Trump denied on Friday he decided to strike inside Venezuela as part of a military campaign against drug cartels. Yeah, right. There are reports that you're considering strikes within Venezuela. Is that true? A reporter asked Trump. No, Trump replied. When pressed again on whether a decision had been made, he said, no, it's not true.
Well, there you have it.
We can't. Yeah, well, I can trust Trump as far as I can throw the Switchblade drones, which from the looks of that, I can probably throw them pretty far because they're like this big. But at any rate, I'll put it like this: I can trust him as far as I can throw. I can throw a briefcase with $60,000 in it that would buy you a Switchblade drone. We probably ain't far. But at any rate, your thoughts on this whole Venezuela thing? I think there are people saying around Trump, I think Pentagon people saying, from one perspective, it may be easy to just throw some tomahawks or something at Venezuela. Maybe from a distance, they could throw some tomahawks at Venezuela. And who knows? Venezuela got S-300s. They might shoot them down. But, once you step into that morass, once you get in, you know what I mean? Once you get in, getting out ain't easy. Remember the old, there used to be an advertisement for the Roach Motel. Roaches go in, but they don't come out.
They don't check out. Yeah.
So I think there's people saying, is this what we want to do, buddy? You better think long and hard before you step into this mess. And I think Trump is thinking. I know he wants to steal all the oil. Anyway, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he does. He does want to launch this. And maybe that I'll tell you, actually, like just a half an hour before this live stream began, I saw some reports that that an attack was actually had been initiated.
Yeah.
Now that hasn't been confirmed. It might prove to be a false alarm. It might be that they're just going to fly to the coast and turn around and come back. But it could, maybe it's happening right now. Or it just may be part of this. I think.
Let me see. Venezuela's trending. Let me see what it says. I don't see anything.
Okay, it looks like
I'm looking on. Let's see. I don't see anything on Telegram. Then the media, U.S. media claimed that Trump would have authorized attacks against bases of the Maduro regime. Hours later, the White House denied it. Yeah, I don't see anything.
Okay, right. I
see nothing right now. It says it happened.
On one Telegram channel, and I didn't see it anywhere else. So, I wasn't sure about it. So maybe nothing happened. Maybe it was another one of these kind of deliberate, demonstrations of U.S. power just to add to the pressure that's being put on Maduro and his people and the Venezuelan government. They may be, maybe this is all part of the plan and they're okay, we'll just keep on putting pressure and then we got our assets there and they're going to carry out the coup. Or maybe they're getting cold feet, like you're saying. It's just that there are realists, some people that still have, are sober-minded within the Pentagon and the State Department, and maybe a couple of those maybe are getting the point across that, hey, this might not be so easy as we think. They actually do have the ability to hurt us, and they could, if we send in the F-35s, they just might shoot down a couple of them. If we do fire the Tomahawks from the ships, well, we better make sure that those ships are far away because maybe they have the anti-ship missiles, and that would be really bad. That would not make people happy back home. Perhaps that's what they're discussing. I don't know. I think they're going to do it, but they've been out there for a long time. So you got to wonder what's going on. Is it cold feet, or is it just part of this, this deliberate game where they just keep on ratcheting up the pressure?
Well, it is. And I like to use the issues of, concepts of self-defense when I talk about these things. Why is it that people teach you when you strike, you want to go out and back? You'll see somebody, they're like, okay, how do you do an open hand? And it's like, boom. Why? Because when you stick that hand out, when you attack is when you are most vulnerable. If you swing, like people love to swing these big hooks that come all the way around here. But where does that hook land when somebody just slips it and it goes by? Where does that thing do? Your arm's here.
Right.
You've missed.
Yeah.
Everything is open. They can just knock you out. They can break they can grab your arm and twist it and break it, snap your arm. You're done if you miss, right? So that's the issue. Can we attack Venezuela? Yes. But the potential for a catastrophic defeat, a catastrophic action for the U.S. exists when you throw that punch. You know what I mean? When you throw that punch, okay, great. There's nothing to them. We're going to beat Venezuela. Ha, 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 ha. So you throw some missiles at Venezuela, and Venezuela fires some anti-ship missiles, and ships sinks 2 or 3 of your ships with 200 or 300 people each. And then some planes get shot down, and you have attacked Venezuela, and you have got the bloodiest of bloody noses. Now you're in catastrophe. What do? Well, that's it. We're going to send some more ships into the range of their missiles. We're going to send some more planes. Now you've had your nose bloodied. If you back off, everybody says, whoo, hoo, hoo, Venezuela kicked your ass and sent you home. If you don't back off, you now commit more into this. And now you're in a world of hurt. Now you're waiting. What happens if you send more? What are you going to send troops into the jungles and mountains? So as long as you don't punch Venezuela, you're back here. You can talk all you want to. But once you swing, you are completely vulnerable. And now there's the potential for catastrophe. And that could be in Donald Trump's presidency effectively.
Yeah. I think they're discussing these things. There must be at least some people that are aware of the downside and say, look, hey, yeah, this might work, great plan, whatever, but it might not. And if it doesn't, then we got a real mess on our hands. And, this is not the kind of thing that you like to do. I know, Mr. Trump, that you like to just quick in and out, just a punch and then you're out of there.
Right.
But
one punch knockout. He wants a one punch knockout.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And he wants to obliterate something in Venezuela, like he obliterated something in Iran and declare that it was the greatest, most wonderful obliteration in all of history and all that. And if maybe he can pull it off. I really don't want him to, but in a way though, I don't know what to say. I guess it's just like, this is my worry is that, let's say if they do actually launch an attack and Venezuela is able to retaliate, I'm not clear exactly what they have.
What then?
Right. And they do real damage, then, we're in for a real war. And the US, no matter what, I don't think they can actually seize this territory and control it. That's something that they've showed that they haven't been able to do in all kinds of places, including, Afghanistan, Iraq, and certainly Venezuela. I mean, I think it's easier to do it in a desert country than it is to do it in a hilly jungle country like Venezuela. They won't be able to actually seize and control that territory. But the US still has, a lot of firepower. It does have 4,000, 5,000 Tomahawk missiles. And they could do terrific damage to cities and to government buildings. And, they could kill, maybe they succeed in killing Maduro and other government officials. But that's just the end result is chaos and a lot of angry Venezuelans. There's no guarantee that you're going to get the government you want, when that's all over. There could be a lot of, I'm just afraid that if Venezuela is able to punch back, then the US is going to go crazy. And then we're just going to have, a lot of needless bloodshed. On the other hand, I don't want to see the US getting away with a coup or whatever. It's just the whole thing this has got to end, this kind of behavior. And so that part of me is rooting for Venezuela. Definitely, of course, I'm rooting for Venezuela. I want them to survive this, but it's, it is, no matter what Venezuela is, it's a small country. It's a relatively poor country, and it's far away from its supporters. It's on the other side of the globe from Russia and China. It will be hard for it to, there's a lot going against it. But, you pointed out it's not like it's all easy on the American side. The best thing would be for, I don't know. It looks like no matter what, something bad's going to happen. Of course, the best thing would be for Donald Trump to wake up one morning and say, this is stupid. Let's go home. And the ships turn around. But that's just not going to happen. He's going to have to demonstrate, that he's tough in some way. Maybe he can find a way to do it that doesn't really, sort of like what happened in Iran, and he can declare victory and then go home. Let's hope that, let's get a little creative here. We'll see.
I think they're possibilities. I think there is a possibility that Donald Trump pulls back. I think based on a number of things that we've seen, like with Iran, Donald Trump is hesitant to stick his neck out real far he doesn't want to get, it was reported that when they were trying to get him to attack Iran, that he was saying, well, I don't want to get stuck in this. What can we do not to get stuck in this? That he was concerned with being mired in some foreign war. Well, that is the recipe for Venezuela, because what are you going to do? Okay, you throw some things at them from a distance. Maybe they throw some things at you from a distance. Maybe they have a little bit of luck. Maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe they should shoot some planes down. S-300s are very dangerous, very, very powerful and dangerous things. So, you could lose pilots, which you're going to get terrible heat at home if the body bags come home.
Right.
But even then, at some point, you got to go in. What are you going to do? We've taken Caracas. What are you going to do? You got to go into Caracas, a city that the city is mountainous.
Yeah.
You're going to go in that city with everybody,
Right.
with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of civilians armed and hundreds of thousands of soldiers armed who are revolutionaries there to defend they are ready to fight. Those people are there ready to fight. They are hoping and praying. If you bomb them, they'll be praying for the day that you come in, because now we finally get to stand up against the gringos. There's no way out. That's Iraq. That's Vietnam. That's all your worst possible nightmares. And I don't think Donald Trump wants that. I don't know if he'll do it. I think this is Donald Trump wants the oil. Marco Rubio wants the domination of the Latino area. You know what I mean? But I put it like this. At this point, I won't be surprised. He may attack, but I won't be surprised if he backs away. Would you be surprised if he backs out?
Well, I think if it's hard for him to do it right now because he's achieved so little, maybe, but he's Donald Trump. Sometimes he imagines that he's achieved great things when nothing's happened. I mean, we see that all the time, right? Or you can just make something up. They've blown up half a dozen speedboats and killed, I don't know, 40 people, something like that. Really disgusting stuff, but he can just say that this was a tremendous, by doing this, he just shut down, the cartels, and the drug trade has been basically, has suffered a blow that they'll never recover from, and so on and so forth. And then the ships will sail home. Donald Trump just might do that, but it does seem rather pathetic, and maybe even he can't spin the speedboat story. So I think there's going to be something, but maybe again he'll blow up some camp in the Venezuelan jungle and say that that's where the cartels were located, and that, boy, he just completely took out the what do they call it, the Cartel del Sol or something like that, something that they just made up, basically.
Exactly.
So they could blow up this cartel that they made up, and then they can sail home, right?
Yeah, good point. Drop some bombs on the side of some mountain somewhere. It wouldn't be the first time the U.S. did that. That's what they did in Iran. They did a faux attack on Iran where they agreed with Iran. Hey, how about we attack and you can blow up a couple things in our bases and we'll all go home. Sounds great. Yes, we obliterated Iran.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Maduro, if they said that, I'm sure that the leadership of Venezuela, if they said, hey, how about we blow up the side of a mountain and go home? The leadership of Venezuela say, sure, pick a mountain. Let us know. We'll make sure nobody's there. Blow it up.
Yeah, no, that's the rosiest scenario, and it really could happen. I hope so. I think the problem is that we also have Rubio, and Rubio really wants to get Venezuela and wants to overthrow, Maduro and his government, as a way of getting at Cuba. I think, for him, that's the final goal. That's, he's from Florida, and he's part of that community, and for them, that is the holy grail. And yeah, I wonder, there may be an argument that's going on within the government right now about, what their real goals should be. And we just hope that the showman wins out, and it's not the Cuba hater.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got, what's interesting? Get your thoughts on this. The Democrats, they can't find a war that they oppose anywhere, right? They won't even oppose this. They're just a complete neocon. You got people in the Republican Party, Rand Paul, the president can't just declare war. Look, I'm a supporter of Donald Trump. I support him, but I don't support dragging us into a war without a vote in Congress. Well, okay, get rid of the without a vote in Congress crap, because Congress is the most neocon organization in the country. But my point is, there's people in that he'll have to answer to. That'll be I'm unhappy with this. And if the body bags start coming home, he won't have no answers.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Again, if he can do something showy and quick and then just sail home, I think he'll be all right. Unfortunately, I think or you can look at it both ways. Unfortunately or fortunately, he'll be okay with that, and he won't suffer any serious loss of support within the country. But yeah, if it becomes messier, something goes wrong, and the Americans suffer a bloody nose, then he can't go home. It becomes much more difficult, and yeah, then he's in a real fix, because that is not what so many of his people, elected him for. It's just say that, yeah, we like the fact that he's tough and that he talks tough and that he obliterates things on occasion, but we don't like real wars, and we don't like the body bags and the and if that's what he gives us, then to hell with him. Yeah.
Yeah, again, he's gambling with it all if he goes after Venezuela. That's the big gamble. You know what I mean? For his presidency, less than a year in, if it goes bad, effectively his presidency goes bad, because he'll lose too much of MAGA to recover from that, and he'll be stuck in a war that he can't get out of. And oh my God, everything bad that could happen. It's kind of like, I was a football fan, and old Coach Joe Gibbs, the old what skins. I guess we're not even supposed to say Redskins anymore, but they used to say, why don't you ever put the quarterback out in the shotgun? He says, nope, only like 5 things can happen and 4 of them are bad, right? So I don't do that. Okay. If you attack Venezuela, there's a number of things that can happen. Probably 10 things that can happen, and 9 of them are bad. And of those 9, 7 of them are catastrophic for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know what they're going to do. The thing is, there's real mixed signals. Again, maybe we're just going to see some kind of missile strike on some sort of footy target. I hope that's what it is. But then there's also I believe there's some marine landing vessels that have like 5,000 personnel on board, and they're designed for some sort of ground operation. Now, maybe, that's what I've heard. I haven't heard anything about it recently, but that's what I heard when the fleet first appeared off the Venezuelan coast. Now, maybe that's part of some sort of, pressure campaign. They have no intention to use them, but who knows? You got them there, and then you have people like Marco Rubio that probably wants to use them. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, how many of those come home alive? I mean, you put 5,000 people surrounded by mountains and jungles, just to move through Venezuela.
Yeah.
What are you going to have, like those big machetes chopping your way through the jungle with 5,000 guys? Yeah, that ain't going to work. They're loaded with poisonous snakes I mean, they got like all kinds of horrific poisonous snakes everywhere in the jungles. And I just wouldn't want to be one of those 5,000
No, neither
guys.
would I. It sounds like a nightmare. I don't know what would be worse, to be a French tripwire soldier or one of these guys with a machete in the Venezuelan jungle. They both sound pretty lousy.
Yeah, you're the odds of surviving that. Before we go, I would like to ask you your thoughts on the Trump-Xi meeting. Okay.
Well, it was incredible. It was 12 on a scale of 1 to 10. That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, but of course, it was the most incredible meeting, and great breakthroughs are made, and all kinds of deals and whatever. I've just learned to tune Trump out, because it's just very little of it's true. There's probably a grain of truth to some of it. And so I didn't even pay attention to what he said. I knew he was going to say something like that. But afterwards, we got a statement from the Commerce Ministry in China. And so there apparently some things were really decided. And well, the Americans clearly backed down on some important things. No more of these port fees for Chinese manufactured ships. Okay, this extension of the blacklist of Chinese technology companies to the subsidiaries. Okay, they've canceled that. 10% in tariffs have also been rolled back. These are all quite significant. For example, that there was that company in the Netherlands that was seized. It was really seized under that new extension of the blacklist to the subsidiaries, because it was a subsidiary. So we'll see. That might even get reversed. And then on the Chinese side, the main thing is that they have apparently postponed at least some of the rare earth restrictions for, and this is the important thing, is for 1 year. And I think this is the way, the Chinese, this is their way of saying that, okay, we've had these truces in the past, and you've broken them. We've seen what you've done to the Russians again and again. You're not to be trusted. Okay, but we've put this, this sword of Damocles over your head right here. That's the rare earths, and we know that's really scared you. We saw what happened. Okay, we'll postpone it, but we can, at the end of the year, it's if we see that you have violated this agreement, just like you violated everything else, it's going back in. So, they're doing it in a very indirect way. It's not the American way. It's like, you better do this or that. They're not being explicit about it. But I think that's the message. That's what's happened here.
Let me ask you this. My understanding is this deal is for 1 year, but at any time during this, they can roll these things back if they feel that the U.S. is not holding up its end of the bargain. Did you understand that?
I didn't actually see that language, but I think that's a fact. I mean, they can, if for example, if the U.S. reimposes these port fees, which is something that really and rightfully infuriated the Chinese. I think they say to hell with it. Yeah, we said a year, but you're doing this already. Forget it. Okay, these are going back into. We're going to implement these immediately. They clearly have this weapon. They've set this 1 year deadline, or a probation period of 1 year, but there's nothing to prevent them from shortening that period. It could be any time.
Yeah, that's my understanding. We've got a deal for a year if you behave yourself.
Yeah.
1 year deal if you behave yourself. If
Right.
you don't behave yourself during that year, then you can't have these toys. That's
right.
kind of it, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding of what's happening here. And it's really interesting because, again, you just see the Chinese turning the tables on the Americans. The Americans always used to do this. They used to have the advantage in these negotiations, and they could impose punishments and the Americans were quite open about it. I guess they've been used to being the hegemon for so long that they just use this, they talk about bad Chinese behavior and whatever, like you hear about malign Russian behavior. It's just like they're bad kids in the classroom and they got to stand in the corner or whatever. The Chinese aren't quite using that language. But if you look at what they're doing, that's what they're doing. They're actually showing that, yeah, they've had enough of this Western hegemon stuff. We too can play at this game now. And actually, we can play it better than you can.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is. Well, it is what we're seeing too. And that is the U.S. pushed people around because it had, economic, diplomatic, military power, right? And what we're seeing is, okay, you could do that when you're playing in a sandbox with Libya and Iraq. Okay, so now you've come up to the bar where the big boys are. And now you got Xi and Putin in the bar. You can't push them around like you can the little guys. And now they're trying to push the big guys, and they're like, we're just as big as you are, buddy. And you push us, we punch back. So, this is not, and the other two big guys have joined together.
Yeah.
To say, Ed, if you fight one, you got to fight both. So it seems to me that this was inevitable with the U.S.'s hegemonic desires. As long as they were pushing around little guys, okay. But if you plan on running the planet, sooner or later, you're going to have to go deal with the big guys and take them out. And when you do that, you're running into a brick wall. And I think that's what we saw. They've run into a brick wall, and there's nowhere to go but the bottom of the sea.
Right. It is inevitable. This is the inevitable trend. And this is the emergence of the multipolar world. It's happening, before our eyes right here. It's the end of American-led Western hegemony.
Yep, it is. It is not. People are talking about it's coming. It ain't. It's here. It's here because when people have the power to resist the hegemon, they ain't the hegemon anymore. Right. And when people have the power not to resist the hegemon, but to make demands of the hegemon, as China does, and as Russia hasn't done, but they're demonstrating they have the capacity. They don't have to make demands. They can, impose their will on the hegemon in their area region of the world. They can say, no, we don't have to listen to you, and we'll impose our will on you. There's not a damn thing you and your buddies can do about it. When that happens, then it's already over. It's too late.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's it's clear that the days are numbered. They still have control over part of the globe, but it's over. It's just like we can say the Ukraine war. Okay, the war, it's still going to have some months and years to go, but it's over. And I think we could say the same thing about the conflict between the multipolar world and the unipolar world. It's just a matter of time.
Peter Erickson. Peter, you can find him at Conversations Among the Ruins with his son Charlie. Let everybody know when you do your live or whatever stuff and what they can find on your channel.
Okay, yeah, we do. We try to do it, and we almost always do episodes on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of every week. And then once a month, we have a subscriber only, which maybe we're going to do tomorrow, usually the first Saturday of the month.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Conversations Amongst the Ruins. It's great. I love it. I never miss anything. I never miss an episode. And I'm sure that if you haven't checked it out and you go there, you'll enjoy it as much as I do. Everybody, additionally, you see everything going along across the bottom: Patreon, PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, all that stuff, if you can afford it. I'm heading to Russia next week. So if you can afford to contribute a little bit for spending money for the trip, it would be greatly appreciated. Also, there's my P.O. box for those of you who use snail mail P.O. box. But yes, as of the 6th, I'm heading for the big town from Moscow. So I'm excited about that. Somewhere that Peter's already been. He's very familiar with it. You think I'll enjoy it, Peter?
You will. You will. Moscow is a lovely city. There's plenty to do, plenty to see, a lot of good food, and a lot of interesting people. And I'm sure, yeah, you'll enjoy it. No question about it.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Share this on all your social media platforms. Go over to Conversation Among the Ruins and become a subscriber. Thanks a lot. We're out.